So let's review some vocabulary related to geometric solids, words like net, base, face, vertex, and edge. Geometric solids are three-dimensional shapes that are all around us in the world in which we live. Even the very house in which we live can be thought of as a geometric solid. And inside that house, there are more solids, such as cabinets, and inside those cabinets are even more solids. So in this particular video, we'll review some terminology related to these 3D solids. Polyhedron is the official name for a three-dimensional figure that has polygons as faces. And so polyhedron is singular, polyhedra being plural. Here we have two examples of polyhedra. A face is one of the individual surfaces that make up a polyhedron. And these are the flat surfaces, and very often you'll be asked to determine how many faces a certain polyhedron has, so you need a counting system for those faces. A vertex is a point at which two or more edges meet. So an edge is the intersection of a pair of faces. So the edge is like the seam. It's where the two faces meet. Now, base, this is an important term. Base is not always the face that the solid object can sit on. I know we think of a base that way, but in the case of a prism, the triangular prism that's shown on the right, the bases are the two parallel congruent faces. Now, the reason why it's important for us to be able to identify the base, it helps us when we go to determine the volume of the object. It also helps us name the object. And so if I see that something is a prism, like the figure on the right, and I look at the bases, which are triangles, I'm going to name that prism with a specific name, namely a triangular prism. Now, the figure on the left, I can see that this is a pyramid because the walls come to a point, right? The triangular faces that make up the sides come to a point. But what kind of pyramid is it? It's a square pyramid because the base is a square. And so we have been looking at cubes for many, many years. And a cube is actually a regular polyhedron. And we call it a regular polyhedron because all of the faces are congruent squares. And there are other regular polyhedron as well. A net, you will recall from earlier studies, is a two-dimensional figure which, when you cut it out and you fold it along the edges, form a three-dimensional figure. It's important for us to be able to consider the net of an object because it helps us determine the surface area of the object. This is the net of a cube. There are actually many different style nets for a cube. This is probably the most familiar one. Notice there are 6 congruent squares which, when we fold it up, would form the faces of the cube. Triangular prism, remember, it's a prism where the two bases are triangles. And notice there will be 3 rectangular faces. And here's the example of a net of a triangular prism. Rectangular prism is such a familiar object. We have these all over our houses, our classrooms. So a rectangular prism has 2 congruent rectangular bases, and then there'll be 4 rectangular faces between those. And here's an example of a rectangular prism net. You can see where the 2 bases would be, and then if we folded the other faces around that, it would form our rectangular prism. We have a triangular pyramid, and that's a pyramid whose base is a triangle. And we have a net for a triangular pyramid. Now, this particular net is a special triangular pyramid known as a tetrahedron because all of the triangles are congruent equilateral triangles. So this is one of our few regular polyhedra called a tetrahedron. In any event, this is the net for a triangular pyramid. A square pyramid, it's a pyramid whose base is a square. And the net for a square pyramid, again, you see that square base, and the sides, which I fold up, would be triangles that meet at the common vertex.